Hey everybody, welcome to Tech Tuesday. I'm Rick Yuzzi from Zcorum, and today we're going to be talking about a challenge for broadband service providers, especially rural broadband service providers, and that's the increase in bandwidth use from over-the-top streaming. And I'll be back with my special guest in just a moment. Hey, thanks for joining me. Again, I'm Rick Yuzzi from Zcorum, and my special guest today is Jimmy Todd. Jimmy is the CEO and General Manager of Nex-Tech. Welcome, Jimmy.
How you doing, Rick?
I'm doing good, thanks. So I thought you'd be a great guest today because you have a lot of knowledge on this, and you've done a lot of kind of research and looking into your own network and working with some other service providers on this challenge. And it's a big challenge, so we'll be getting to that. And I just want to say also up front that if you're watching us live, feel free to just through the YouTube chat, you can make any comments that you want to make, or if you have a question, type in a question, and Jimmy and I will look at that, and I'm sure we'll be able to answer it or get an answer later if we can't. So that would be through YouTube chat. Feel free to do that at any time. So Jimmy, let's just start off. Before we get to that, also at the end, we're going to be talking about, so I want you to stay to the end. We're going to be talking about some legislation that, proposed legislation, I guess, that can maybe help with some of these challenges. But so Jimmy, tell us a little bit about Nex-Tech first, a little bit about you guys.
Well, Nex-Tech started out as a cooperative telephone company, and our initial reason for being was provide voice services, voice telephone service, and got into long distance, started providing broadband service, internet service, video service, television. We have a wireless affiliate, got into security. Then we continued diversifying, got into IT and business solutions, continuing to diversify, got into carrier services with NOC and Kalia, and network monitoring tools. And we also had a really sharp marketing and media team. So we started providing ad solutions or our marketing media type services to peers. So we've got customers all over the country, 48 of the 50 states, wow, including Alaska and Hawaii, U.S. territories, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, in Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Canada, Micronesia, Saipan, Marshall Islands. We've just been, through growing and diversifying, our customer base has kind of expanded beyond where we serve a fiber footprint, which is about 10,000 square miles in northwest and north central Kansas. Wow.
So I guess that would be things like the cloud services where you can service people all over the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Our ability to provide the monitoring tools and NOC services, Kalia services, that's really expanded, where we're able to work with our peers in a lot of cases to provide services to their customers.
That's great. So what kind of, so the video service that you're talking about, that would be for your subscribers in Kansas, is that right?
That's correct. Our fiber-based customers, we've had a Minerva IP TV system for many years. In the past couple of years, we've offered a streaming video service ourselves, just a way to try and simplify things. Our customers were already starting to go over the top, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Yeah. But we also provide a video service through an app in that way.
And that wireless service, is that that's a mobile wireless?
It is. We have a ownership in a company called Nex-Tech Wireless with a couple of our peers here in Kansas. Okay. And it's grown to cover a good portion of the geography of the state of Kansas, and they've got roaming relationships nationwide.
So what about you? How long have you been there, and how did you get started in this business of broadband and communications?
Well, I got into telecom after I got out of the Navy. I was in California at the time and became a INR tech at Pac Bell. And after the SBC merger, I looked for an opportunity to pursue at US West in the Portland metro area, and then while I was there, I got to experience the Quest merger. Mm-hmm. So I've got to see, we were talking yesterday about divestiture broke up Ma Bell, and then it seems like they've been consolidating and coming back together, ever since. But got to see a couple of those firsthand. And at that point, I was ready to be done with corporate telecom, and I transitioned to the independent telco side of things. And broadband has been just a piece of that evolution in technology for communications.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. Yeah, we were talking about that, about how it broke up and it kind of consolidated again. It reminds me of the film The Terminator, the very first one.
Right.
Did you ever see that, where he shoots the frozen Terminator, metal Terminator at the end, and he breaks up into a million pieces, but then he just kind of all comes back together again. That's kind of what happened with the phone companies. So let's talk a little bit about this challenge of bandwidth, and what kind of increase in bandwidth. And I know we'll pull up some slides here. What kind of increase in bandwidth have you seen, just through Nex-Tech?
Well, we've got a group, our NetOps group, which their whole focus is watching our core network and the amount of traffic that goes across our network to serve our customers. And this slide shows going back to December of 2016. Mm-hmm. And you can see how between December of 16 and December of 2020, we saw an increase from 4 petabytes to almost 14 petabytes down, 3.5 times growth. So, these guys are sharp. They realized back in 16 that, this was a trend that they had been watching, and we needed to start doing some upgrades to our network. And so we saw this kind of growth in data, whereas our customer base only grew 6%. Mm-hmm. So a tremendous amount of data growth. The next slide kind of focuses on peak. Mm-hmm. So as you're looking at your network stats and everything, the amount of peak capacity that we saw going across our network increased from 24 gig to 77 gig over that same time frame. So we embarked on a core network upgrade in 2017. It's a 3-year project. It was a few $1 million. And, that took us from a 10 gig network to a 100 gig network. And, again, it's covering 10,000 square miles across the state of Kansas. Mm-hmm. And, we've had a year since we finished that project. And, quite honestly, in 3 years, we're probably going to have to start increasing capacity on some of those network elements, just because of continued growth in demand that we're seeing on the network.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll go back to the previous slide. So, if you look at the downstream, you see that it did tick up. It ticked up quite a bit, but the upstream was probably where you really noticed it, right?
Well, the upstream, I think, the pandemic really was the huge impactor there, because when you saw people transition from, school at the schoolhouse, work in the office, and start bringing everybody home, now you were seeing a whole lot more upload across the network. We're fortunate. We have built a fiber network across 95% of our area. And with that, it wasn't a huge stressor on our network, but we definitely saw the need for a higher upload capacity and speed than ever before.
Yeah, I know you're at the office today, but I'm at home, so this would be something I'd normally be doing at the office, but yet it's hitting my service provider at home. So yeah. Mm-hmm. So do you, obviously the pandemic did have a big increase in this, but have you also seen with with some of the new streaming services, it seems like there's a new one coming out almost every week, but you've got all these, you had Disney Plus come out, HBO Max has really been making a push. You have Paramount Plus, I think, Discovery Plus. So all these guys have come out just in the last year or so. Has that had an impact? And then what about cord cutting also? Are you seeing that that's having an impact as people maybe had your pay TV service before, then they say, you know what, I'm going to cut the cord. There's all these other options out there. They cut the cord, and then suddenly they're maybe stuff they were watching on their regular pay TV, they're now streaming over the top.
Absolutely. All of that is impactful. So, as you saw more over the top video coming out, that's what impacted those graphs that we just went over, right? It was primarily the streaming video, because when you look at the file sizes that are part of streaming video, and then you look at some of the technology used by some of the over-the-top providers, they use adaptive bitrate. So say you've got a capability of a 10 meg connection, okay? So that stream is searching for, how can they present the best possible content to that viewer? Well, if you upgrade your network and now they have the ability to get 25 or 50 meg capability, that same technology is looking to see what can I push to that, end user so that they get the best experience. And so that's why you can see that even as we continue to improve our network, the amount of capacity going across it was increased, but without without a symmetrical increase in our customer base. And as you were talking about cord cutting, we have seen that same effort happening in our customer base, because for years when you heard cord cutting, it was telephone service, right? They were cutting the landline. Well, as over the top streaming video became more and more the norm, you started seeing a higher rate of cord cutting on traditional video service. And to your point, that's revenues that are no longer coming for that particular product, and yet it's causing an increased capacity on your broadband network, which led us to have to make that multi-million-dollar core network upgrade. And we're a rural provider. We built our network primarily with the help of USF, and USF was never designed for core network upgrades because of over-the-top streaming video. So it's definitely a challenge that we see going forward.
And then you were talking about adaptive bitrate. So really, basically, what that is they'll eat as much as you'll give them, in a sense, right?
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
And then has 4K been a factor yet? Because that's obviously, as more people do that, that's going to be even more significantly using bandwidth, right?
It will, as you continue to see the quality of content, 4K, even 8K down the road, that will require significantly more capacity. And so you're going to see networks that need to continue to invest in order to keep up with the demand going across it. And so at this point, I can't say that there is a ubiquitous 4K content path out there, but you're starting to see that become an option more and more. It seemed like it was HD and then UHD. 4K is that next thing that becomes mainstream. And 8K is now starting to be developed. So that's on the way.
Yeah. And actually, you had gotten some information on just kind of the figures of how much bandwidth streaming is taking. This was you as well as some of your peers. Is that right?
Right. Been working with a group of 5 peer companies for about 3.5 years now, and trying to raise awareness to this concern for the folks that operate companies in high cost areas. And we combined our data and we analyzed it to find that 75% of the data going across our network was making the big streaming companies extremely profitable. But yet the cost of the content delivery, as well as the upgrade of the network, allowing the delivery of that content was borne by the service providers. And in high cost areas, it doesn't really make sense that they can deliver a product across a high cost, network and not pay anything. I can't think of any other networks that operate that way. But we were able to kind of quantify which different streaming service was impacting our networks, and that's how we got to that 75% number. And that's just within our group. But on the next slide, this comes straight from a USTA broadband brief titled Streaming Upstream, Deploying Rural Broadband in the Age of Streaming. And they basically came up with the same thing that we found. Our numbers were on the high side of it, but they found that 50 to 75% of network capacity was streaming video. Mm-hmm. So it confirms exactly what we were seeing. And then the next slide talks about, when you look at density for providing service, subscriber density really impacts the cost of providing the service. Mm-hmm. Urban areas can have a whole lot more than 100 locations per mile, but you get further away from the city center and you start having fewer locations, in a geographic area. As locations per mile decrease, the cost per location increases at an exponential rate. And in the geographical area I serve, we're looking about on average 1.5 subscribers per mile. Mm-hmm. So, the cost to serve that customer is greater.
Yeah, I always realized that there was a cost in rolling out the service, like deploying it the first time. For example, if you're going to run the fiber and you only have one customer, 2 customers per mile, that's expensive. So you're saying that even just the ongoing delivery of that service is more expensive?
Absolutely, because you're always going to have maintenance on service lines, right? Mm-hmm. If it's aerial, you've got Mr. Squirrel and his friends that want to chew on the aerial cable. If it's buried, you could have somebody, preparing to, dig a post hole and they didn't get a locate called in. Mm-hmm. So you're still going out there. Well, again, fewer subscribers per mile, you're looking at cost per, customer significantly higher. Mm-hmm. And, when you look at a lot of the packages that are out there now, which talk about providing money, funding, support for broadband build-outs, those are great, absolutely wonderful. Mm-hmm. It allows, broadband or fiber or whatever means to get out there to serve customers, but they forget the piece that, we're talking about here, where you're going to have to upgrade that network. Even with fiber, you're going to have to upgrade the electronics. Mm-hmm. And the ongoing operational cost of it. So, those are things that I think get forgotten about when they start talking about the billions to build out, unfortunately.
Yeah, in fact, we were talking about this yesterday too. In this latest Biden infrastructure bill, there's $100 billion or so for broadband that they're looking at allocating. There's not a lot of details yet. But what they have said about it was, one thing is they want to get away from subsidies, which may be USF, something to help kind of the ongoing service to, rural areas. But then also, I was going to say, the other thing they're talking about is, pricing, trying to reduce the price and almost making it sound like they're going to do some kind of price caps. But what are your thoughts on that?
And, that's a concern too. I mean, when you're operating in a high cost area already, the cost is higher to serve that customer. Mm-hmm. And, I'm supportive of things like E-rate and programs that will help folks that need help affording services. But at the end of the day, we've got to be able to run the network and continue to make the investments to keep the network up. Mm-hmm. One of the concerns you run into, say, when you look at capacity going over a network, when you have greater than 85% capacity on an IP network, that's when you start having issues mm-hmm. on that network. Up until that point, it can run really smoothly. Mm-hmm. But, somewhere in that 80-85% range, depending on who you talk to, you start running into, congestion issues. Yeah. Well, if you've got education going across that's impacted. If you've got healthcare, information going across it, that's on there. It can all be affected just because of the fact that you got a lot of folks watching Netflix and HBO Max, and it's not because they're trying to cause problems, but if you can't stay ahead of that demand and that capacity requirement, you're going to negatively affect everything going across that network. And that's why we have to continually make the investments and stay ahead of that curve.
Yeah, the analogy I use there is just a highway, right? So everything's running smooth on the highway, and then you get it to a certain point and you start getting a traffic jam, or the traffic slows down. And that's the same analogy as trying to keep ahead with adding more lanes so that doesn't happen, because people are not happy when they're in a traffic jam. So, is there another analogy I like to use with this would be, a service that you might pay by how much you use, right? Let's take the water company, for example. So they sell water to their customers, and I might, let's say you've got a retired couple that lives there, and they're not using that much water. They do one load of laundry a week, and there's just the two of them. Then you cross the street, you've got a family of 5, 3 teenagers. The mom's doing 4 loads of laundry a week, and the dad's watering the lawn, and kids take 30-minute showers each every day. So if I was a retired couple, I would not want to be subsidizing their water use. So is there something to be said now for maybe we need to start looking at a usage-based pricing model that takes into account the people that are streaming, or is there just now everybody's using so much that's not workable?
Well, one of the requirements for us is that if we receive universal service support, we've got to keep our rates at an appropriate or at a lower, more affordable rate. I look there's always the comparison between the electrification in the 30s and what they want to do with broadband. But, sometimes I have an electric bill that's $200 and sometimes it's $500 depending on, usage, right? Well, we can't charge, that and still be within the requirements that we have to follow with providing our services. So, there's a challenge there. We've still got to be able to continue to make enough to support the network, maintain the network, upgrade the network, expand the network, but balance that with being affordable. And so that is a challenge. But I know that there are some providers who have gone to a pay-per-use program, and it has worked for them. I can't say that I think that across the board it will consistently work for broadband the way things are today. You kind of look at the mobile wireless world. At one point, they were charging for long distance, and they were charging for minutes, and they were charging for per gig in data,
right? And
everything started condensing to one fee to cover everything, right? So is it happening? Yes, I do know that it's happening in some places, but it's not a widespread practice at this point.
So obviously we have to see what happens with this Biden infrastructure bill and what they do with that, but you've been staying on top of this on a couple of bills that are coming out, or at least proposed. So why don't you tell about those? There's 2 of them that are out there. I think there's more information currently on one, right?
All right. So in last Congress, H.R. 2929 was introduced, and that was the Rural Broadband Network Advancement Act. And what that talked about was, introducing this concept of the impact of over-the-top streaming video or edge providers impacting the rural networks. And it talked about a network user fee. As we socialized that on the Hill and met with the folks who are the content providers, the edge providers, the pushback was, as you always hear, we want more data. So as the new congressional session started in January, Congressman Mullen out of Oklahoma, who had introduced H.R. 2929, worked with us to put together H.R. 1650. And what that does is introduces a FCC study on network traffic in high-cost rural areas to kind of quantify the impact that over-the-top video as well as any other type of traffic is having on our networks. And I think from that, the learning lessons that we get from this, study can help us, with hopefully a reintroduction of the RBNA so that we can move forward on, having the edge providers help us ensure that their content is, delivered in the best possible manner to their customers who are also our customers without negatively impacting our overall network.
Mm-hmm. And were you saying that they were in Europe, they were already prepared for that, or they were maybe paying some of those fees?
Yeah, there are some countries in Europe that, a lot of the situations are a little different. Their networks are owned by the country, but they require some of the over-the-top video providers to pay fees to use their network. So even though it hasn't been a standard practice here in the U.S., we brought this up from a high-cost rural perspective. We're not asking them to do that, in an area where, if, say, I serve a community that has 50,000, I should be able to have the density that I don't need the same kind of help to support that network as I do in an area where I've got, 1.5 customers per square mile.
Right.
Big difference in the dynamics of, financially being able to support a network. Doesn't mean that you're not having the same impacts, but if you don't have the same revenues coming in, it makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything that, those that might be listening, other service providers that also face this challenge, that they can do to put their weight behind these proposed bills?
Absolutely. Ask your congressman to take a look at HR 1650 and support that. We are also working on a Senate companion bill that we hope to have out fairly soon. And then as we get a reintroduction of the RBNA, hopefully we'll get a lot of support based on this FCC study to help push that forward.
So is the way this went is there was 2929 out, and then they wanted more information, so 1650 is supposed to get that, and then maybe they reintroduce 2929, is that right?
That's exactly
similar?
Right.
Okay. So basically call your congressman or write your congressman and let them know. And especially,
Certainly.
I guess, especially you can let them know how it's impacting your...
And I'm always happy to answer questions. If anybody has any, they're welcome to reach out to me here at Nex-Tech.
Yep. Yeah, and if you, I don't see any questions that we got from anybody that's watching live, but if you're watching this recorded, you can reach out to Jimmy, or if it's easier, you can go ahead and leave a comment on the YouTube video, and I'll make sure I send that to Jimmy so he can answer, or at least get me an answer, then I can post it right on the comments there as well. So great. I appreciate your time. This is definitely something that needs to be looked at. If people were to, a lot of people don't have the visibility into their network, so they know they're using more and more of their resources on the network, and they maybe have not broken that out, and they don't necessarily know how. So, I think that, they would probably be shocked if they looked at their network, because you showed some of those figures, and we've got a NetFlow product that we offer, and I looked at one of our service providers and their network on there, and the numbers were very similar. They were actually lower, but they have not yet broken out. It's really hard on NetFlow to break out some of those individual flows and figure out exactly what they are. So a lot of that video is under encrypted. They haven't figured out how to break out Disney Plus yet, and HBO Max and some others, but yeah, it's at least 40% on the media streaming on the network. So I think people would be shocked if they realize. So hopefully something will come about from this legislation. If something does, we can have you on again, and we can talk a little bit further about that.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Jimmy. I appreciate your being on with us, and thank you everybody else for watching. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to type those in the comments if you're watching this later. If you like this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed to our channel, and you can hit the little bell and you'll be notified when I am live or post a video. And I am live every Tuesday for Tech Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks again, Jimmy, and I will see you next
Rick.
week. Bye-bye.